Okay, let's dive straight into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking what is honestly a masterclass in digital persuasion. We're looking at a highly structured piece of content that seamlessly blends deep spiritual messaging with some incredibly urgent calls to action. And right from the very first frame, it absolutely does not hold back.
The source immediately hooks you by framing the message not just as some ordinary piece of internet content, but as a direct, unmissable, and totally urgent message from God. By explicitly calling it a divine interruption, the speaker is essentially demanding that you stop scrolling right this second. It establishes these incredibly high stakes right out of the gate. If you miss this, you miss your turning point. It's just a fascinating study in how digital persuasion can be wrapped in this intense theological urgency.
Section 1. The divine interruption, demanding immediate attention.
Now, what's really interesting here is how the source explicitly targets people in a highly specific emotional state. It speaks directly to anyone living on autopilot just to survive, those carrying heavy emotional exhaustion, or people who are constantly overthinking. It reaches out to those bruised from past disappointments and numb in places that used to feel deeply. By articulating this hidden everyday fatigue so perfectly, the source builds instant trust. It makes the listener feel truly seen, which establishes a massive psychological hold right from the start.
Section 2. Defining the hinge moment. Small choices, massive structures. So, the speaker introduces this concept of a hinge moment. It's defined as a seemingly small, ordinary decision or act of surrender that carries the weight of redirection and unlocks the larger structure of a person's life. Think about an actual hinge on a door. It looks incredibly small compared to the heavy door itself, right? But if you take that hinge away, the whole structure becomes useless. They apply this directly to life choices, arguing that consuming this exact explainer is one of those crucial hinges. It elevates the simple act of listening into a life-altering act of spiritual surrender.
Section 3. The true cost of delay, agitating the problem. Here is where the source agitates the problem. The crucial point is that the cost of delay isn't portrayed as some instant massive disaster. It's actually portrayed as a quiet internal decay. The speaker warns that when you delay obedience, your spiritual sensitivity dulls, your discernment gets cloudier. That resistance actually becomes a practiced inner habit, leading to prolonged, entirely avoidable confusion. And eventually, that misalignment just begins to feel completely normal. It's a super compelling psychological argument warning you against the slow erosion of purpose.
The enemy does not always need a dramatic collapse. Sometimes all he needs is another delay. Wow, right? This quote perfectly captures how the source characterizes spiritual danger. It's almost never an explosive cinematic failure. It's a slow leak. It's a postponed conversation. It's going another month calling your numbness normal. The speaker uses this brilliant framing to strip away any excuses you might have for waiting for a better time to take action.
Section 4. Emotion versus obedience, the friction of surrender. The speaker sets up a really sharp dichotomy here between what we generally want and what the source actually demands. On one side, you have emotion. This is the desire for thunderclaps and fireworks, chasing that sensation of being moved or waiting for the absolute perfect mood to strike. But on the other side, you have obedience. That looks like taking quiet, practical steps. It's setting a boundary, apologizing, or moving forward while your heart is still tender. The source heavily critiques our modern tendency to just sit around waiting for spiritual euphoria.
Imagine a house where one room has been closed for years. The room does not become beautiful because the dust was denied. It becomes beautiful because the room was finally opened. The source relies heavily on really striking metaphors like this to explain inner healing. You can't just pretend the dust, the past trauma or the bad habits isn't there. You literally have to open the door and let the light in. Acknowledging those old wounds, as unglamorous as it feels, is framed as the only real path to clarity.
Having the lamp is not enough. You must have the oil. Drawing on a classic biblical metaphor, the speaker insists that external religion, having the lamp, going to the services, knowing all the right songs, is entirely useless without the personal oil of an inner spiritual life. The oil represents time spent in quiet presence. And the speaker makes a huge point here. That oil is completely non-transferable. You can't borrow it from a friend or a family member when a crisis hits. You have to do the hard work yourself.
Section 5. The call to action. Steps to the shift and financial sowing. So what do we actually do about all this? Well, the source gives specific practical steps to achieve this promised shift. It starts internally, pause, and let the surface settle in stillness. Next, name the specific truth or compromise hiding in your life. Then it demands action. act immediately without waiting for emotional validation. And then we see a really stark transition to step 4, a demand to support the mission financially to unlock a spiritual breakthrough. Let's look a little closer at how that pivot is presented.
Even in how you choose to support what I am doing here, what you release now is not just money, it is seed. Objectively speaking, this is a fascinating tactic. The source directly ties monetary giving to your own personal spiritual breakthrough. The speaker reframes the act of donating money as planting a seed, so it's not presented as just tossing a few bucks to support a content creator. It's framed as an act of divine obedience that will return to you as a massive, overflowing harvest of favor.
To actually facilitate this, the speaker explicitly lists standard platform monetization features, using the Super Thanks button, joining as a channel member, clicking the PayPal link in the description. The source frames these everyday platform features as a literal spiritual lifeline. I mean, how often do you see a YouTube Super Thanks button equated to partnering in a divine harvest? It's an incredibly effective, totally seamless integration of digital mechanics with high-stakes spiritual language.
Section 6. The final ultimatum. The edge of the cliff. The window of opportunity does not stay open forever. The source concludes by framing the current moment as a fleeting opportunity. The warning is that grace is available right now, but the window will eventually close. It purposely places the listener on the edge of a cliff, basically stating that if this moment is missed, they might miss the very life they've been praying for. It is the ultimate culmination of urgency, tying the entire message perfectly back to that intense opening hook. Miss this, miss everything.
So, how does the psychological weight of a divine interruption change the way a viewer interacts with a standard call to action? To wrap things up today, I want you to consider this final provocative thought. Every single day we see calls to action on the internet. Subscribe, donate, click the link in my bio. But when those standard engagement tactics are wrapped up in literal divine authority, it completely shifts the paradigm of how we consume and react to content. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the source material. I hope you found it as fascinating as I did, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.